is at a family member's house in America instead of in Israel for the unveiling of her mother's gravestone. So she's not in her usual place, and that hence the placing of the camera, just so everybody knows. Okay, yeah, if you can you lower it? Yeah, can you lower it just a tiny bit more? There we go. Yeah, that's better. That's good. Okay. So let's get started. There's some people who've been on with me for every call or almost every call, and we just got off a doozy, which I'm going to recommend you to listen to it, Rivkah. You're going to so love it. Okay, so, and I learned a ton. This is just, I did not expect this summit to be this, I almost said incredible, but that's true. I didn't expect it to be like this.
Do you know what? I think there's some confluence of things going on. I mean, there's all the energy that you poured into the preparation and you're interviewing and so forth, but something's opening up. And I think it's coming through in what you're doing. Oh, all these people are saying hi to us.
Yeah, great. Okay. It's coming through in the speakers. That's it. Yes, the audience. Look at the audience. They're amazing. I don't even like to call you audience. You're the community, the soul tribe. But yeah, I'm still proud. Can you guys imagine? Like, there's so much that I just heard and learned to process, even for me personally. I mean, especially for me personally, especially about Israel and whatever. Here we go. Yeah, every speaker is different from the way I've ever heard them before. It's not just how I'm listening. Something is coming through. And thank you for saying that. It's
right.
True.
Yeah.
So true. Okay.
You're the midwife. You're the midwife.
I guess so. What an honor. Okay. So let me just officially get back in my kalim, as they say, ground back into my body. I'll just show you guys this because we're all getting so close. There's a lot more than this. Let me see. I'm not looking at the camera. You can see it. I've got these, I don't want to spill them, but I've got these crystals, a bunch of them. I've got a lot more. And sometimes I feel like my body starts shaking and my face starts shaking and I have to hold them. I don't know why. It's just something.
Stay grounded.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. I was the whole time when Rabbi Wolf was speaking. Anyway, yeah, it's really, things are moving forward, and keep readjusting so we get under your chin. Right now you're just at the edge here. There you go. Anyway, yeah, I am up for this. I'm just sharing. Okay, so anyway, so yeah, that's I'm really glad you said that, Rivkah, because that is important for all of us to realize. And that's what I'm feeling from my end, but I haven't spoken it until you just said it, that there's new things are coming through as we speak, literally as we speak, and they're not coming just from me. They're coming from every speaker. They're coming from how it's hitting the audience, and it just keeps growing. And this is part of how we are co-creating in real time. What are we doing? We're shifting ourselves, which allows God's revelation and manifestation of his own vision, which is the messianic reality, to emerge through us. And that happens in real time. That's not just you learn and you take it away.
I have chills. Thank you for letting me participate in this.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Okay, so let me officially introduce Rivkah, Dr. Rivkah Lambert Adler. She is, some of you know her, some of you don't know her. I invited Rivkah specifically to speak about the topic of prophecy and the role of the Jewish people to be a light to the nations. And when I say that, Rivkah's role is, and her active passion, very active, very passionate passion, is to teach people who are not Jewish their role in this emerging, unfolding reality. One of the things Rabbi Wolf mentioned, Rivkah, is that he said, I'm sure somebody's spoken about the 7 Nochad laws. Nobody has. So I've assigned that to you as just a small part of what we're saying. So this, again, everybody is in it together. We are an organism. It is the small finger of the right hand has a particular job. The liver has a different job. A cell in the left hip has a different job. We are all cells in different parts of this cosmic body that once we fulfill our role and actualize our own, for lack of a better word, vibration, our core mission, our core beingness in this whole, when we understand the whole and we live into it each in our own unique way. And that happens through your relationships, the things you were born with, the things you're fighting with, the things that you are longing to bring on, the things, the shifts that you make, all of it plus. So as that happens, the entire body merges and moves forward. And once we reach this, the final place of this stage, which is simply, we're right at the edge. We're right at the edge now. It's not that it ends. It's that the composition is complete, and then every cell shines the entirety. So at that point, that's why one of the prophecies says that if and that when the Rambam says that based on this, that the Maimonides, that at that time, no man would need to learn from another man, because everybody will be knowing God. The entire occupation of the whole world will be to know God, and everybody will be knowing God in accordance with the actualized highest, fullest potential of what it means to be a human, which is not what it's meant to be a human. It's very different from what it's meant to be human. So that's what happens when we function as our cell. We're a bigger cell, we're a smaller cell, we're more cosmically connected to more people, or deeper ideas right now, where it's just a shift in our own life. That makes no difference, because every cell must actualize for the body to actualize. And once the body actualizes, every cell receives directly in accordance with the full capacity of a human.
So when you're saying every cell, what I'm hearing is not just the Jews.
Yes, 100%. Yes, not just the Jews, not just the famous people, not just the people who seem like they're out there doing more, not just the authors who are writing books. Whatever your thing is, you must live it, because the whole depends upon it. And then you will have the exact same access as, it's going to be a different universe but yes, of course, Jews and non-Jews. Let me officially introduce you before we just get lost. Okay. So as I said, Rivkah, I'm not going to read the bios. I've been doing that sometimes, but I do want to tell you the highlights. She's a writer. She has been a writer for a long time. She specializes now in Jewish and Israeli content. You've been living in Israel for how many years, Rivkah?
12 years. 12 years.
You came from Baltimore?
Baltimore. Yeah, I saw somebody in the comments said that she was listening from Baltimore. So hi, go have some David shoes for me.
Okay. So Rivkah is passionate about living in Israel as well, even though she is currently in Florida for an important reason. But anyway, most of what she writes is about this. And she's a freelance journalist. Her articles highlight people and organizations that are doing inspiring, non-political things in Israel. And this is the part I do want to read. In 2014, while working as a journalist, Rivkah discovered a phenomenon that she identified as a Torah awakening among non-Jews. Now, this does not exclude Jews. We all have our role to play. We are in it together. First, she saw this in social media, later in personal encounters in Israel, but she started to meet former Christians and current and former who were expressing a desire to connect with Torah, the land of Israel, the God of Israel, and the Jewish people. And writing about this phenomenon has become a central mission and passion in Rivkah's life. She's written the book 10 from the Nations, Torah Awakening Among Non-Jews. That was 2017, and I guess revised and republished in 2022.
Just republished.
No. Okay, which describes the phenomenon of this prophetic, the non-Jews coming closer to Torah. And the second book, which was recently published, which I read one Shabbat a few months ago, I was riveted. It's Lighting Up the Nations, Jewish Responsibility Toward the Nations Today and in the Messianic Era. So that elaborates on the God-given responsibility of the Jewish people to serve as what's called Or L'Goyim, or L'Goyim, which is a light to the nations, that famous phrase. And then the third book is coming out in 2023, entitled Women from the Nations in the Hebrew Bible. Whoa. Which fleshes out the story of women in the Bible who weren't born to the Israelite nations. And as Rivkah said, this is my most ambitious book to date, and will make ancient Torah commentaries on these non-Israelite women available to the average reader, regardless of that background. So this is groundbreaking work. And thank you so much, Rivkah. And I do want to say, Rivkah understands that I'm probably why I want to say this, but I think we talked about this with, I don't remember who, one of the speakers yesterday, about the obligation not to blur the lines and yet to be completely, inclusive. So everybody's role, one of the interesting things, it's kind of a cosmic principle, and I'll just say this and then give it over to Rivkah, but it's a cosmic principle that for things to unify in a godly way, they have to first separate. This is actually the Baal Shem Tov talks about how there are 3 stages in ultimate unification. And the first one is called Hachna, which means to submit to a higher order. The second one is Havdalah, to separate from anything that, there are a lot of explanations for this, but let's just say to become completely yourself and not anyone else. So the distinctions, sometimes people say unity or take unity to mean that we all blur together and we're all the same. No, we're not. Each one of us is totally unique. And that total uniqueness, and especially in the divine sense in our role, has to be actualized and brought out. So there can't be merging until this happens, because it will be a blurring and a tamping down. And that's actually what the other side, that I think Chaya mentioned this morning, the merge with AI and whatever. It's like the hive mind, the board mind that is anti-Torah, that is anti-God. So we have to have this self-actualization, which means you're not someone else, you're you, and be proudly you, all within the context of the Torah, because everybody must come back to the Torah, because it is the blueprint for creation, in order to facilitate the redemption, which is for everybody as well, through that revealing of the absolute connection to God, to the source of everything, which is obviously the source of everything and everyone. Anyway, so we're in the stage of Havdalah. We need to, I think toward the end of it, where we need to fully express without compromise our own role in this Torah-based emergence. So there can't be the blurring of those lines or roles, or we mess up the whole thing. At the same time, the third stage is called Hamtaka, which means sweetening, which is where now everything is fully itself. Like the pieces on the puzzle, let's say they're like kind of fuzzy and gray. You can't tell where they belong. Everything has to be illuminated and colorful and fleshed out as what it is. You have to see the picture on the box. Are you a cell in a finger? Are you a cell in a lung? Are you a cell in the brain? It doesn't make a difference, because you're here because your cell is absolutely essential. And then when we put the pieces together, you don't see the pieces anymore. You see and every piece is equally important. Think about a puzzle of 5,000 people that is missing the last piece. It's a problem. Or like we said in the last call, if you have a vast electrical system and you're missing one little connection, the whole thing is useless. So I just need to say that, because I know that Rivkah is coming from this place as well. And I just want to be super clear about it. Now that we're reaching out more and more, we need to be super clear so that we don't blur the lines, and yet we help everybody be part of this in the way that they're uniquely here to be, essentially here to be. Okay. So let's just get started. We'll talk about being a light to the nations and what you see unfolding now and what you feel.
Okay. So there, I'm going to just bring it down a couple of notches, because that was really high. And just talk about, as this thing is unfolding in front of me, and I'm trying, as a journalist and as a Jew living in Israel, even though I'm temporarily in America, I'm trying to capture what is going on. And for a lot of people, the feedback that I get, especially from the non-Jewish world, I do want to talk about the Jewish reaction to all of this. It's been very interesting in it. And there's something happening that I want to speak about. But from the non-Jewish world, there are people that I meet or that come across my work who are saying to me, it is such a relief to them that somebody is talking about this, because they have felt something's happening with them spiritually. God is leading them on some kind of journey that they don't understand. They're not necessarily where they know they want to be, but they're in process, shaking off some of what they came into this world with, or what they were taught as children, or what their families gave them, and trying to find their true path. And the energy and excitement that when I speak about non-Jews, I am primarily, from my own experience, speaking about what all current and former Christians. You with me now? Okay, yeah. Current and former Christians, meaning they're people who grew up in some way, shape, or form as Christians and never imagined that Israel or the Jews or the Torah would have anything to do with their spiritual development, with their souls. Okay, so then they experience whatever this is that they experience, and many of them initially feel very isolated because nobody around them understands.
Right.
The way that God seems to be playing this out is very similar, I think, to the way that he picks from among the Jews who's going to move to Israel at this stage in history. That it's like an individual light goes on, and when that happens, sometimes a person has not found a peer group yet who understands this journey. So one of my roles is kind of to coalesce and to let people know who are coming from a non-Jewish background, not only are you not alone, but you are part of something that God is moving in the world, that is your journey out of whatever you were raised with, whatever flavor of Christianity you were raised with. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a Jew, but it does mean you're getting more into alignment with Torah and with redemption and with the ultimate destiny of the relationship between the Jewish nation or the Israelite nation. I'm struggling a little bit with language now as I get deeper and deeper in this, but aligning more with what God wants for the whole world. Okay, so 10 from the Nations was originally published, as you said, in 2017, and it came out of as a Jew formerly living in America, living in Israel. I had no idea that there were people like this around, and I think most Jews still don't know. And I was very interested personally to meet them. And this book was an attempt to find something that is going. I don't think I understood it. I clearly didn't understand it fully back then. I don't understand it fully yet, but Hashem is revealing more and more pieces of it to me. And these are people who are spiritually alive in a very powerful way, willing to take risks, really tearfully and soulfully wanting what God wants for them, and they're trying to figure it out. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just such a big fan of people like that. But here's what I realized after meeting them is that prophecy, and I want to speak specifically about Zechariah 8:23, which is where the title 10 from the Nations comes from. Here's a translation. So said the Lord of hosts, in those days when 10 men of all the languages of the nation shall take hold of the skirt of a Jewish man, saying, let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. Now, the preeminent Torah commentator Rashi from the 11th, 12th century said there's biblically 70 nations. 10 men from 70 nations will cling to, however you understand this, each corner of the talit, of the prayer shawl that a Jewish man wears. And since a talit, by definition, has 4 corners, each Jew will attract the attention of 2,800, that's 700 times 4, God-fearing non-Jews. And this
Wait, so you're saying 70 nations times 10, non-Jews times 4 corners of the garment.
Right. Which means that there's an awesome responsibility on the Jewish people to guide these people who, probably a lot of them are on this call with us, who are looking for an understanding of who is God to them and what does God want from them and how do they get in right alignment with God. So what I saw was, and I want to talk about this because the Jewish reaction, Jews are not where we need to be yet in this process. I mean, some are, but we're very, very much in process. The way that I describe it is, I don't know if you've ever renovated in your house, but we've renovated a kitchen twice. And so I know a little bit about it. What I know about it is the very first step is what they call demolition. Okay. First, you got to take everything out and you make it worse. When you're in this process of building a new kitchen, the first thing that you have to do is get rid of everything that's already there now and take it down to its core. And then you start rebuilding. And then it looks beautiful after 6 weeks or whatever the process is. Okay. We are very much in the demolition reconstruction phase. And so after 2,000 years of not so pleasant history between the Jews and the Christians globally, there's a lot of resistance and a lack of nuance in the Jewish world that I'm trying to educate Jews about, because I can see, and I know that this happens to you and among your students, people who are coming from a non-Jewish background who are hungry, thirsty, just like the prophet Amos predicted.
Yeah.
And there aren't enough Jews who are willing to provide the guidance that they need. And it's our job.
Yeah.
So you still got a lot of Jews. I just want to be clear that I operate on two levels, right? So on one level, there's this beautiful, all that stuff you articulate about how it's going to be, but we're not quite there yet. Right now, we're still in a messy stage. Okay. So, so I want to say, a couple of days ago, I saw this beautiful, beautiful thing that I posted on Facebook. It was, I believe it to be a Chabad sign at a bus stop. And I just have to find this. I'm sorry that it's not up. Let me just read this to you. It says, Judaism, the Messianic redemption process will elevate the entire world to holiness. Now, I think that this is a beautiful idea, okay? And it very much echoes what a quote from Rabbi Anava that's on the back. Oh, let me show you this. This is,
No.
It's blurred. I'm not sure if you can see this. Okay. That's good. All right, this is the revised edition of 10 from the Nations, Torah Awakening Among Non-Jews. But I kept this quote, and because there's this relationship that's forming, and people like you and people like me are a little bit more aware, I think, than the majority of the Jewish people. But when I posted this quote about this bus stop sign, some Jews went a little crazy because they think that if you use the word Messianic, you mean the confused Christian distortion of the word, and the Jews shouldn't use that word. I mean, obviously, the Messianic redemption process is just geula. That's just what it means. But they were like probably like a Jews for Jesus ad, and why are you promoting this? And Jews shouldn't be using this word because it means all this. Whatever. I was very, very shocked by that. But I think that just as somebody coming from a non-Jewish background who is a truth seeker, who is trying to align themselves with what God wants from them really, really, and how to be prepared for redemption, they have to go through their stages. A lot of Jews have to go through a stage. And one of those stages is understanding that the first reaction when a lot of people hear about what's going on is to get really possessive, to say the Torah belongs to us, Shabbat belongs to us, Mashiach and Geula is ours, like exclusively, because we have spent 2,000 years
being burned at the stake,
literally, but protecting ourselves from anybody encroaching on what is holy to us. And we are now in a different stage, but a lot of people haven't caught up with that. And so there's not Lighting Up the Nations was designed to open this question up a little bit for more Jewish people to understand that something's happening and that this is not something that I made up. This is what messages in the Torah that have always existed, that have been telling us that this is the correct alignment between the Jewish nation and the rest of the world. We are meant to illuminate. The prophecy tells us that we are supposed to be the ones. That's what Or Lagoyim means. You know what I used to think? I used to think Or Lagoyim meant all the Jews would move to Israel. We would create some perfect society. The rest of the world would look at what's going on in Israel and say, wow, they did such a good job. I admire that. Let's try to duplicate that.
Like a role
model. It was like, we're in our bubble and the rest of the world is in their bubble, right? And they can look at us and they can admire us, but there's no real interaction going on. That's the stage I was in early on. Now I understand that it's supposed to be interaction, but you were talking earlier about the necessity to maintain boundaries. And that's something that I work very, very hard to do. So for example, there are people in various stages along this road. Some people have been doing this for decades. Some people are coming, kind of tearing their way out of whatever that they were taught just for a short time. There could be people on this call who have been doing it for 30 years and other people for 30 days. So there's a whole bunch of stages that people go through. And in Lighting Up the Nations, I developed a taxonomy that you've seen to try to capture some of the stages so that people could understand where you are today is not necessarily where you're going to be 6 months from now or a year from now or whatever, depending on how much authentic, godly teachings you get exposed to. And so I have a range of people who are in communication with me. And the one thing I will not do, and this is where my rule is, where my boundary is, like, I don't discuss the New Testament. I've never read the New Testament. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in, who's like the king of that is
Sylvia Singer.
Right?
Yeah, he's going to be on. He's going to be on Sunday. That's a don't miss.
And people who want to understand stuff about that, those questions need to go to him. But what I do is to try to maintain my boundaries as a Jew and to share. So I want to talk a little bit about this third book that's in process, because it's incredibly ambitious, and it has two. It's like this thing is unfolding. So the first book was really, here's what's going on, and I was really just a journalistic approach to introducing this idea that there are people coming from a non-Jewish background who not only don't want to kill us or convert us or burn us at the stake or anything like that, but that they really want to connect to whatever they understand Jews know about God and figure out what is their proper role. We're not talking about conversion here. A very tiny percentage of those people may ultimately end up converting at some point, but that's not at all the agenda. The agenda is to create a world in which Torah values and Torah guidelines is what is primary, and people find their place in that world. Okay, so 10 from the Nations and the recent reprint is, or revised edition is, the phenomenon. But then again, there's a version of
Rivkah.
Yeah.
Just so your voice keeps fading in and out, and occasionally you freeze. I don't know if there's anything you can do about it. So if there's not, we're just gonna. So far, we can understand you. You come back, but if there's any, if you're moving back and forth the microphone or anything, maybe just adjust that. I'm just gonna say it once because it is doable. But
all right, I'm working on an iPad and I don't have a lot of.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, we're hearing you. No, don't be sorry. I just wanted to see if we could upgrade. If we can't, then we'll.
Okay.
This is extremely valuable. Just keep going.
So, so the next stage, once I've revealed, tried to amplify the voices of people who are in this process, is to get Jews on board, because it has to be some kind of cooperative. In order to fulfill this prophecy, the Jews have to be speaking to the rest of the world. It's not the time for being in our ghettos and so forth. That's over. And I think that's why there's something about the Jews returning to Israel. This is what people tell me, that the Jews returning to Israel to a Christian as a fulfillment of prophecy that they can see has happened like in their lifetimes is the process that ignites some people's souls. Like they see that it's easier today to believe that God is still working in the world and God still has something to do with the Jewish people, because you can plainly see it by what's going on in Israel, even though we're still in the messy stage And we certainly, you know, and I know from living in Israel, it's not a Torah government. We don't have a Sanhedrin. We don't have the third temple. We don't have all of the promises.
Basic Jewish values.
Right. Well, there's some of it, but we're not there. Right. But we're not there yet. Okay. But because I can't emphasize it's enough that we're in process. So lighting up the nations was designed to be a wake-up call to the Jewish people to say, this is happening. You don't need to, you need to get on board. Like, not everybody has to be a Shifra or a Rivkah, so willing with open arms to interact with people who are coming from different backgrounds. But the Jewish people as a whole need to understand that this is something that God asked us to do way back before the beginning of Christianity. And it's all over our text. So one of the chapters in Lighting Up the Nations is, excuse me, all of these places that I found in the scripture that talks about this is like a goal of humanity, that we're all worshiping one God, the true God, the creator and sustainer of the universe. And that has always been the goal. We were diverted for 2,000 years from that goal. So it's something that is playing out now. So I'm building, right? I'm building a kind of, I see the comments are going crazy and I want to pay attention to them, but I don't want to lose my train of thought. And so,
no, I think you should complete your, share a lot of what you have to share. And then I think we can go and look at questions if you have time. Cause I think there's people really looking for real answers.
Okay. So the third level now is to actually show in Women from the Nations in the Hebrew Bible, which is under development, what does it look like to really engage with Torah in a way that Jews have classically done, elite Torah Jews have classically done for a very long time. But most of the Christian world doesn't approach it this way. So I'm going to assume that the readers are familiar with the stories. And I specifically picked women because that resonates for me. And women who were not born into the Israelite nation, although some of them, not all of them, some of them do become part of the Israelite nation later on. But what I'm adding to the conversation is not just the Bible text, but all of what we call Chazal, all of what the rabbis and the holy Jewish books have said about these stories that add flesh to the bones of the story. So it's a demonstration of how Torah actually works, that every line of scripture is filled with meaning and depth on multiple levels. And that's one of the joys of opening up Torah to people who they know Bible. They know chapter and verse probably better than I do, better than most Jews, because they learn it on that level, but they don't learn it, they don't learn it deeply the way Jews do. So that's what I'm coming to share. Now, I don't think it's coincidental that some of the shift that's happening. I know that you're interviewing a lot of men, but there seem to be more women on your speaker list this
Always.
Summit.
Oh,
yeah,
speaker list.
I don't know, but it because there's
two of my favorite women speakers declined because they were writing books. But yeah, okay.
There's something going on here, that there is a lot of rebalancing of masculine and feminine energy in the world right now, which is also prophesied. And I think that it's not surprising that you are one of the people who is also like coalescing the vapors. You are bringing together these conversations in, like I had one little slice of the pie. This happens to be whatever. This is my shlichut. This is my my mission, is to build bridges and to remind people on the Jewish side that God wants us to do this, and that the kind of fear and fear with which the Jewish people have been dealing with the non-Jewish world for 2,000 years isn't natural and it's over, like, or it's ending. And we have to get into a different alignment with the rest of the world. That's our job.
May I just say that the Rebbe said many years ago, I don't remember the exact date, that if the Sheva, when he talked about teaching the 7 Noachide laws, and I know that for some people that is not enough, but it's an essential foundation. So he said if we had been teaching, if the world had known the 7 Noachide laws, the Holocaust would not have been able to happen. So it's not just that in other words, I'm saying it's not just that the danger has abated to a large degree, but rather that what we do will wipe out anti-Semitism. By people taking their role, by the Jews taking their role and the non-Jews taking their role, there won't be any more of that. So,
yes,
anyway.
I don't know if it's cause and effect, but it definitely goes together, because so we, and you probably do the same thing, but we open our home to people who are on this journey when they come to Israel, and often have them for Shabbat meals. And what we find is we just have sort of, ground rules. Like, we're not going to talk about the New Testament. We're not going to talk about Jesus. We're not going to talk about Christian. We're going to talk about Torah. We're going to talk about God. We're going to talk about Geula, like those kinds of things. And we find that these conversations and these Shabbat meals are unbelievably elevating on both sides. We are enriching one another without blurring our boundaries. So, for example, one of the complaints that I hear from people, and I totally understand this about the Noahide laws, is that rabbis say that the 7 laws are like headings, chapter headings,
Right.
And there's a whole bunch of nuance for each one. In general, most of the chapter headings are stay away from this, don't do this, avoid this, and so forth. And frankly, doesn't take a lot of time. Okay. Whereas, so it's, I think of it as sort of like it's a good starting place when a person has to get to of renouncing their relationship with any other faith system and understanding that the Torah has a role for them, and observing the 7 Noahide laws is certainly start. I have not seen it as a full elevating lifestyle for people. It's not enough, but there's so much that's available. There's so much learning.
It's enough to turn.
That is full. And go ahead.
It is enough. However, it seems to be the Torah describes it as a very essential foundation, because you're right. It's not enough to connect to God. It's, of course, anybody who's spiritually questing has a much bigger path, but these are the core things that shift somebody from being on the side of destruction to the side of co-creation, to use my words.
Beautiful.
Somebody said
right.
It's not.
So we're agreeing.
Is doing something.
Yeah, we're agreeing.
Yeah.
We're agreeing that it's a foundation, but it is not meant to be all that there is. Okay. And one of the things that I spoke about another summit around Shavuos time is the explosion of Torah literature that's being published now, specific with a non-Jewish audience in mind. So for many, many years, there are Jewish publishers that have been translating. They publish in English. So they either translate classical Jewish sources into English, and the stuff's available on the internet, so anybody can buy it. You don't have to speak Hebrew or Aramaic or be able to read it. You can just go on Amazon or go into a bookstore and buy books about Judaism. And that's been available for a long time. One of the problems is the same as, I remember this story. I was say by way of background. So I was born Jewish, but I wasn't given a Jewish education as a child. And so I was 20s when I became interested. What's that?
Nor was I.
Yeah. Okay. So I was in my 20s when I became interested in studying Judaism in a serious way. And resources were available, but I had no way of knowing which books were kosher, which books were on my level, which books were going to be too scary because they were too hard, too advanced, whatever. And I need teachers to guide me there. when a non-Jew opens up Amazon and looks for Jewish books, they also don't know necessarily how would they know, like, who are good people to learn from, who are not able to speak to their souls and so forth. But now what's happening is that there's beginning to be a subculture of people who are writing Torah in English for non-Jews. And I think that's very encouraging, because it means that something is seeping in, right? So more resources are becoming available. There's also more online learning opportunities. Like, I have this fantasy, I don't know if this will ever happen, but I have this fantasy for me personally, but also a vision for the world, that now, if you're a Jewish person and you want to come to Israel and study Torah, there are, especially if you're young, there are hundreds of different schools that you can go to, and each one has a slightly different flavor, and you can find the one that matches the path of your soul and the teachers that resonate for you and forth. But for a non-Jew who wants to study in a serious way, if they're assuming that they're not studying for conversion, there's no curriculum. There's nobody, they want to one teacher or several teachers online, but there's not like a pathway to them learning. And so we're going to need to create that. We're going to need to create either bricks and mortars or online learning opportunities that are specifically designed to bring to bring the nations into a deeper understanding of what the Torah prescribes for them. We're not there yet, but I can see that happening. I can see the temple on Har Bayit, on the Temple Mount, and I can see the Sanhedrin, and it feels so real to me sometimes that the prophecy of the nations, like flowing, like water, like flowing onto the Temple Mount. So while they're in Israel and they're trying to connect to the creator and the sustainer of the universe, there would be schools, there would be teachers, there would be places that they could go. Somebody mentioned Nativ in Houston, Texas. That is Ruvain, I can't remember, but he himself is a Ben Noach, and he does some of that, but there needs to be more of it, because you know what, numerically, the Jewish people right now, we're a very small people, and the people among us who are waking up to this reality that we need to serve in this role, just the numbers don't work out. So we need more. Thank you, Ruvain Bryant. Thank you, Veronica. We need more and more people from the Jewish people to be willing to be a bridge. There was something very beautiful. Some social media has its downside, but there are some really lovely things. And this is something that I saw. I don't know who Eli Sobel is, but he wrote this message.
Oh, I know Eli Sobel.
Yeah.
He's on Wall Street. He's very passionate about Mashiach. He lives somewhere near New York, Lubavitcher.
And so this is what he talked. He's talking to the Jewish people who have the kind of Geula consciousness, who are like on the edge of our seats waiting for this. And he said, our job is to hold the hands of those who will be startled when the light begins to shine. And I found that so beautiful, because I think I've heard, and I suspect that there's some truth to this, that the world has really, the time for the arrival of the Messianic Redeemer, the time for this to move a little bit more quickly, I think has come and gone a whole bunch of times. And the reason we're not quite there yet is because God in his compassion is waiting for more people to kind of get on the Geula train. And but I do think that there are going to be people who are going to be startled. For example, among the Jewish people, there are going to be people who are going to be completely surprised that Torah has anything to do with non-Jews, that Shabbat has anything to do with non-Jews, because we are taught that to believe that these are our exclusive gifts from God. And it's a whole sense. I'm not sure. It's a whole alignment. I'm going back and forth between talking about the point of view of non-Jews who are coming into a larger awakening, who are trying to align themselves, and also the Jews and their reactions. I'm going back and forth. So I hope I'm not being confusing.
Is Rivkah being confusing? It doesn't seem like it to me. Anybody?
Okay.
Let us know if there's anything confusing. No, not being confusing at all.
Okay, great. Okay. So this is the process that we're in, that's unfolding, that I'm watching happen, and that I'm trying to document, and that I'm trying to push the envelope a little in my own way. Obviously, I can't do this all by myself, but this is my piece of it. Now, I also, just as a Jew living in Israel, I have my own Geula consciousness. I have some friends, for example, just the Shugala Davar, they're obsessed with the third temple, or let's say, and that is what gets their juices flowing.
Who are you saying certain? What I missed? Who is obsessed with their temple?
Certain Jewish friends of mine who live in Israel, and
right.
and everything for them is about the third temple, and that is like the cornerstone. I think that Hashem gives us. It's like he has this big bag of, I don't know, jelly beans or something. And he says, okay, these jelly beans are yours, Rivkah. These jelly beans are yours, whatever your name is. Shifra has her set of jelly beans. Maybe it's a bad analogy, but like you were talking about the cells and how we're all one organism. So on some cosmic level. So something is redefining, but there are a lot of people who are uncomfortable right now. We're in a stage where a lot of people are uncomfortable. Non-Jews are sometimes uncomfortable because once they open up to this reality, for many of them, it becomes very lonely because they lose their communities, basically. And because of the way it's holding, that for the most part, it's like one person here, one person here, one person 100 miles away, and so forth. You can connect to some degree online, but it can be very lonely and very hard to hold on to this vision, because the only way you can connect with people who see what you see and want what you want is to go online. But in your everyday life, people going to church on Sunday, or they're not godly thinking kinds of people at all. And so you're left in a kind of desert wherever you live in the world, because it's happening all over the world. And you're lucky if you can find one or two friends in your circles. And I don't know how to fix that. I think it's just a function of being like ahead of the curve a little bit. Eventually the world will catch up to this. The same thing is true with Jews like you and me, who are trying to spread some awareness of Torah and some of the universal worship of the creator of heaven and earth and the sustainer of all things. We also are, I know each other personally, but there are also Jewish teachers who are kind of isolated. And I know I certainly have gotten my share of criticism from Jews. Yes, from Jews who don't like what I'm doing and don't think that what I'm doing is something that anybody should be involved in. And I'm whatever. We don't have to dwell on the darker part, but it is part of the reality, because we are at this stage. But it's so easy for me to imagine that this won't always be the case. And like more and more people are joining us, and more people's consciousness is shifting, and more people are speaking. Did you already interview Rabbi Pinchas Winston? I think that was a couple of days ago, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Like,
so he
yesterday, I think. By the way, he was also the best I've ever personally heard him.
So he was one of my very early Geula teachers. I call him my Geula guru. And he was talking about this stuff 25 years ago. And so from him is when I heard, he doesn't so much, he knows what I'm doing, but he doesn't so much focus on the conversation we're having now. But I know, and he knows, that there are a lot of non-Jews who listen to him. And he's not really specific specifically speaking to them in the same way that I am. But I mention this because 25 years ago, he was saying some of the same things that he's saying now and that other people are saying now, but there's just more. It's like there's an energy that's built, and it's really lovely to be part of that and to see more people coming in alignment with some of these ideas that, for some people, history is like this. It's like this linear process, and it just goes on forever. And my children will have, well, I'm already a grandmother, but my grandchildren will have children, and they will have children, and, forever and ever and ever. Like, that's just the way it's going to go. But that is not at all the world that you and I live in. I'm talking a lot. Not the world that you and I live in. We know that there's an endpoint that's built in, and it seems to be rapidly coming. And as more and more people get in alignment with that, I think that I think that more people who are already there will find themselves teaching or holding the hand of or helping along. We live in, my husband and I are empty nesters, and we live in a fairly large apartment in Israel. And one of our daughters is always talking to us about, like, why do you need all that space? And you should just downsize. And she could be right on some level, but on some level, it is so real to me that we may need to be welcoming people in, that things are happening so fast now. My husband uses this analogy of a toilet paper roll. You should excuse me, but like when it gets to the end of the roll, like it revolves much more quickly. Right. And right. So it does seem like there's some of that going on, that things are accelerating, and we're part of that.
Well, yeah, you posted on a WhatsApp your vision of Geula, and that was part of it the other day, and it was, I missed the Geula Thursday. I don't know what's. Anyway, yeah, it was very beautiful, and you said that it was compellingly real to you.
It is. Yeah. I have a friend who lives in the north of Israel who told me that he has been collecting mattresses, and he has a stack of mattresses in one of the rooms in his house because, I don't know where this comes from, but there's this tradition that Jews should have like a suitcase packed if you don't live in Israel, so that, when the Messiah comes, you need to be ready to go. Right. And so I already live in Israel, so I don't need to pack a suitcase, but I do need, I need beds, and I need sheets, and I need rooms, and I need to be prepared. That is part of what is very real to me. And here I'm speaking about the Jews, but I'm also, there's a status. I know we've spoken about this before. I just want to introduce this idea, and I don't know how much more time we have left, but I want to introduce this idea that in Torah, if we consider the Noahides as sort of the base foundation, right? There's an idea that non-Jew can participate in Torah even live in the land of Israel as a non-Jew on a higher level. We're not there yet. We don't have the rabbinic body called that would recognize them and so forth. But this possibility exists. There could be, and there was pre-Christianity. There was this, So I'm saying, I'm speaking about Ger Tosha.
Feel free to explain this in more detail if you want to. If you want to talk about the stages from the enemy Goy level to the B'nai Noach level to the Ger continuum.
Right. So listen, I'm not gifted with prophecy, but what I'm speaking about is something that is unfolding that non-Jews are looking for. Well, what the heck am I? If I'm not a Christian, right, and I don't want to be a Jew, how do I get in alignment with what God wants from me as a non-Jew? So we are right now offering Noahide foundation, but it's not enough. It's like, this is my perspective. I'm speaking from my experience, but it's not enough. But I want people to know that eventually what will be available is something that's called Ger Toshav, which means you're not a Jew. You don't have the obligations of a Jew, but you are also not a follower of any other faith system except for Torah. And you are to be recognized as I don't want to use this word because that means something else, but you're eligible to be recognized as a non-Jew who may live beside the Jewish people, live a Torah lifestyle. One of the differences will be, it will not be obligatory. Obligatory. So for example, if you and I do something on Shabbat that we ought not do, or if we eat something that's not kosher, that's a problem. Okay. That goes on our record. If a person is not Jewish and does that, it's not a sin for them. I'm trying to be careful. The sin is such a Christian laden word. I don't really want to use that word, but it's not a black mark.
It doesn't harm the program. It's not that when, that's the whole idea. Right. When we do something that God commanded us not to do, we are harming we're harming the program. Ultimately, that's not the case for the non-Jew. With non-Jew doesn't keep the 7 mitzvahs, then they're harming the program. So it's a bigger space of operation in a way.
Right. So this elevated level of Ger Toshav is like kind of as close as a non-Jew can get without converting. And it existed before the advent of Christianity, and it will exist again in the future, but it doesn't exist right now. But it is something that people who are really searching could know, this might be a possibility for me at some point in the future. And I think that the land of Israel will eventually include Jews and non-Jews living together, Jews and Ger Toshav living together under a Torah framework. And we will understand the laws much better. I mean, the laws have sort of gone into, what's the right word? Not hibernation, but they haven't been relevant.
I think that's the right word.
Okay. But they haven't been particularly relevant, but it will be again. And I think that that's something that can encourage some people. I know that it's hard for non-Jews to hold on without a community, without the world, most of the Jewish world accepting them or being willing to engage with them as serious spiritual seekers. And I know that a lot of them, they like fight with, I don't know, fight, but they get into debates or whatever with Christians about how wrong they think that Christian thinking is, but they're not necessarily interested in becoming Jews. They're just in this limbo stage. And I want to tell them, like, the Jews are also in a limbo stage. There's so much that's wrong in the world right now. And we all have to just hold on to this rope that something better is coming. And I don't know if your other speakers were a little bit more uplifting. I know I keep going back to this point that we're going somewhere, but we're in this journey, and we're in a hard part of the journey right now, but there is such a vision of it's going to get so much better, and we're all going to understand much more at a cellular level, what our role is, and how to amplify God's presence in the world.
Yeah, it's not that I differ. I see two perspectives side by side that are both true, in terms of being uplifting or seeing it as a problem and the mess, or seeing it as like the future. I think that we're in that transition point where with very little action, we can create a giant shift. And this whole time that you're speaking, what I'm literally making notes for myself also to think about afterwards. I have had two questions. I had one question on my mind. Now talking to you, I have two. One, the first question was, how can there be the innovative Torah teachers? What's happened is most of them are doing their own thing with their own following. They're not collaborating with others. I'm trying to think of a way that we could provide an opportunity for a lot more, for working jointly without having to do the same thing. That's all I'll say about that. With this, I'm just, you're saying that there's no, and I see what people are writing also, like people are feeling very alone. There's no actual prescribed path forward. There's no real community other than perhaps Nativ or maybe a few others. But how hard would it be to create such a thing? If you start with online, which is a gift from God, people are feeling their soul tribe here online, and people can visit each other once they have those connections, and they can build physical communities. But they just need to know each other. Why? What would it take? It would take, at least one rabbinical consultant who's well respected, maybe a few, who could define the halacha, the law of what's allowed and not allowed. And then it would take people like some of the people who've been speaking on this summit. Most of them speak to Jews and non-Jews. Most of them feel very strongly for this, feel that, I don't think that there's anybody here who doesn't know that Torah is for everyone, and that everyone has a part, and that Geula is for everyone. So I'm just wondering, maybe it's not a conversation for now, but would that serve? Does that speak to you guys? Like, if you had I've been thinking about this for a long time, but not so actively. Like, really, how hard would it be to have a school where different people contribute, where questions can be answered, where the paths are laid out? I know that Rabbi Sutton I think he's been working on a siddur for non-Jews. Is he the one who's been doing that? Or there other people who have created those?
There's one that already exists. There's a Noahide prayer book for Noahides.
There should probably be a few consultants from different perspectives, because it is, and this is how Torah innovates anyway. The way Torah is innovated, Torah is not innovated because Torah was given to Moses, and it can't be innovated. Like it says, nothing can be added, nothing can be subtracted, but yet Torah is revealed on different levels and new applications through the one Torah to new situations that never existed, like can use the internet on Shabbat. There was never an internet before, or, there are all kinds of applications for this, but so this should be innovated. It should be discussed. How does innovation happen? Different people who are qualified to understand the issues and the law, the Torah, the halach of the Torah, discuss and debate and come up with solutions and with perspectives that then become part of the Torah, the revealed Torah. And why shouldn't this be happening? This should be happening. One of the problems is, in my opinion, you and I, Rivkah, we've been to, we know some of the same people in this. We've been to some of the same, so one of the problems is that the people who are knowledgeable and passionate have not necessarily been mainstream. So what if there were some mainstream people who would become part of this effort? It doesn't seem like it. If it's something that has to happen, then it's something that has to happen. And I'm putting that on the table,
So as you're talking, I'm having this thought that you're sort of asking, where's the tipping point? We've been gathering energy, gathering hearts and souls and so forth. Where's the tipping point where there's a response that is not just individual? Like
right.
I can only do so much. I can only reach so many people. I publish because then I can reach a lot more people than I can invite to my Shabbat table, for example. But when does the there have to be a lot of things that have to realign in the Jewish world so that the Geula can be fully expressive. And I'm speaking now as a Jew about things that aren't right in the Jewish world that need to be realigned, let's say, to get more on the Geula wavelength. Because even though I see that the energy is growing and the numbers are growing and people are more comfortable to speak this kind of language and to say, yeah, we're in this stage, I don't want to say that we're at that tipping point. I don't feel like we are yet. I wish we were, but I don't think we are yet.
You don't feel that we're at the tipping point where we could create solutions or work together?
Right. I think we're still opening up. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, because your vision is much more optimistic. I also think that there's some responsibility for non-Jews who are on this Torah path to find one another and to support one another. the Jewish people have a responsibility, but we also have things in our own house that have to be cleaned up in preparation for redemption, and a lot of Jews that need to be brought on board. You know, that I was told about some of the pushback that I got, and maybe I told you this before, but one of the rabbis spoke to me, and he was just perplexed, I'll say, in the nicest way I can, about why am I spending time teaching non-Jews when there are so many Jews who don't know things about Torah? And why don't I teach the Russian immigrants? And why don't I teach the Ethiopian immigrants and speak, to the Jewish people as a whole before I start, spending my time with non-Jews? And that is a reality, and I think a lot of people think. So there's only so much. I don't know where where the responsibility for this falls, but it seems to me that some of it has to come from within the corpus of people who are on this path, and they can create some structures, perhaps Jewish teachers in. I don't know. I just don't think that we're at that tipping point quite yet. But in the same way that I imagine in Jerusalem there being schools for non-Jews who are coming from one of the biblical feasts or something like that, where they can come and sit and learn from Jewish teachers, that we're not ready for that yet either. So, but it could happen very quickly. It could all.
I just find the online world to be so much more flexible than any other venue. It's so easy to look at I'm not saying it's so easy. It's not like it takes no effort or doesn't take a lot of people, but it doesn't take building a building. It doesn't take collecting money. It doesn't take, we're charging a minimal fee for the downloads that helps defray our expenses. It's not like it's not like it's not so hard if a few people wanted to work on it, and it doesn't have to be perfect. We don't have to provide the ultimate solution for the universe, but every movement starts somewhere, and it starts with a few people who really, really care about it.
Right. You're not
if
wrong.
Online learning is awful, then I don't know why you're here. I'm just saying, we're learning online right now.
You're not wrong, but here's the thing. You and I know the power of living in a community, and living among people, sharing Shabbat meals, sharing holidays, sharing life cycle events with people who are spiritually in alignment. That as Jews, it's a little easier because we have always lived in community. But we're talking, are you responding to somebody?
Yeah. Keep going. Sorry.
It is something that in extra of Judaism that the non-Jewish world, especially coming out of a Christian background, it isn't automatic. And I really feel genuinely, I feel for them, because I know how lonely it can be. And I know, not just because they can't necessarily in their everyday life find other people who think like them and are on their path, but who do they celebrate with? They're not Christian holidays anymore, right? And they're not necessarily able to have Shabbat invitations every week to be sitting at Jewish tables. Like, what are they supposed to do? That's why I say that find people who are like-minded. I don't know that the Jews need to run that. I don't know that we need to be in charge of that at this stage. But I really do recognize this is a very serious issue, and online seems to be at this stage, one of the only solutions that we have. But as I keep saying, it's evolving, and we won't always be in this stage. So
nobody said if you convert, you aren't considered Jewish. I don't know what I'm not following the entire chat, so I don't know if I missed something. Nobody said that. If you convert according to Jewish law, you are considered Jewish. Or if you're born from a Jewish mother, you are considered Jewish. Those are the two.
Somebody else
Jewish.
Somebody else mentioned about raising children. I just saw it flash on my screen that's another aspect of having, how do you raise, it's one thing if you're an adult, but if there's somebody named Ariella who's now talking about the whole 10 tribe thing and reuniting and who are the Jews and who are the rest of the greater house. Is a much bigger conversation than we're able to have now, but all of that needs to be worked out in the future. How does that people who might have been part of the greater house of Israel who were exiled with the 10 northern tribes, how did they get realigned with the people who were left, and the people that we now call the Jewish people? Like the language, it's so messy because using the word Jewish doesn't represent the entirety of the people who had the original covenant with God. And I understand that. But again, we're in process. So you have people who believe about themselves that they are descended from the 10 northern tribes. They want to be reunited into the greater house of Israel. Some of them are willing to, or are at a stage of their own spiritual development where they have renounced a significant spiritual relationship with Jesus / Yeshua. But some of them want to bring that into the Jewish people, and that's problematic. So it has to be resolved. I don't know what the ultimate resolution of that is. It's much bigger than anything that I can solve. But for right now, I'm just saying I recognize there's a lot of moving pieces to this, and we're, again, to use the kitchen renovation analogy, like we're very much in process, and we just have a lot of moving parts. And even though you are so beautifully articulate about this vision and so forth, then I don't mean energy down at all, but just to be realistic about the fact that the process is unfolding and it's uncomfortable for a lot of people where we are right now. And just to be real about that. Not that it's not beautiful where we're going. It's even beautiful where we are now, like to be a Jew living in the land of Israel and to be able to invite non-Jews who love God and are trying to figure out what their role is into my home, and to be able to as a journalist, as a writer, to put some of these ideas into the world, to say something's going on, you guys, and whichever side you're coming from, you need to be aware of it, but figure out where your place is in it, but also to be realistic about the fact that I don't have this all figured out in my head. I often say to some of my non-Jewish friends, some of whom still have some spiritual relationship with who they think is the Messianic Redeemer. And I say, your end game and my end game are not this. I just said this to somebody just 2 days ago, or maybe this morning, I don't remember. I said, our end game is not exactly the same. But here's what I think we share. We both believe that God will reveal to all of us what the ultimate truth is, what our correct place is in it, and how we can honor and learn from one another to be more spiritual people, to be more godly people, to be more in alignment with what the Torah's vision is for Geula and for the next stage that we're going to. So that's the attitude that I try to bring to all of my interactions with people who don't necessarily agree with me on everything that I believe at this stage, and that's okay. There's Jews who don't believe everything that I believe, and I can still love them, and I can still have them in my family and have them in my home and have them in my life. But all of us, I think, share belief that God is and will continue to reveal to all of humanity what's the correct balance between us.
Okay. Work in progress. Does anybody have any specific questions for Rivkah? I see people are really appreciating you, but do you have any questions that you would like? I was not able to follow the whole chat. So anything anybody wants to ask, well, we have her on the line. She is an expert in a lot of this.
So Nacha mentioned about, right now we've been talking mostly about people coming from a Christian background, but there's billions of other people in the world. I have occasionally been contacted by people from who were brought up Muslim, and Buddhism is another huge world religion. I think because I'm an English speaker and I'm America, that I attract, and maybe more of the energy is coming from.
Of course,
former,
you grew up with it. So did I.
Right. So, but so I'm much less familiar with people from Buddhism and so forth. But I will say that in Lighting Up the Nations, there's a rabbi from Israel who goes to China and speaks to huge groups of people in China and teaches them Torah. And so it's not just me. There are other countries that are beginning to turn to Israel and looking for all of this. And so we're in process, and yes, eventually, like right now, as I said, most of the energy that I experience is coming from the Christian world, and there are 2.2 billion Christians in the world, and the numbers of them that are waking up to Torah and the importance of Torah is relatively small. But even if it's only 1%, which is what one of my Christian friends has estimated, that only 1% of Christians are at all in this conversation, that's still a huge number of people. That's like 22 million people. And that's like enough to keep me busy for the rest of my life.
Sorry, but it's going to grow.
God willing, it's going to go. Yeah.
Well, would you like to scroll? I don't know if you want to go or if this is very illuminating. Would you like to scroll through the chat and see what people have already said? If people don't have asked questions and they haven't been answered, what I see is, and this is my perspective.
Wow, this is a very busy chat. Is it always like this? Wow.
This summit, it's been like this the whole time. Yeah. It's nonstop. It goes really fast.
People are really just so.
Yeah, people are into it. People are into it, but I can see from the comments that there are still a lot of unilluminated answers for people. And I don't know how much you want to get into it, or if we wait for Tokyo. But there's even different people.
I'm not interested. So I'm not interested in debating theology.
Okay.
I don't find that or do that. It's not my area. It's not my gift. Here's how I feel. This is how I sometimes describe it. There's a bridge, okay? And there's me on one side of the bridge, and there's somebody who's interested in the gifts of the Jewish people or the Torah of Israel, the God of Israel, the land of Israel, whatever, on the other side of the bridge. I'm going to cross the bridge and yank somebody across. But if somebody's already walking across the bridge, I want to be at the foot of the other side to welcome them and to help however I can. And if somebody's not ready to make that journey, then they're on their own path, right? I don't want to butt heads with people. I don't want to, I don't want to try to talk people out of where they are spiritually, because I wasn't raised in a religious home. As I said, I was born Jewish, but if somebody would have aggressively tried to convince me of the truth of Torah when I was in my teens, let's say, I don't have ears to hear that. I have to, a person has to be ripe, and only Hashem ripens our souls when we're ready. So somebody asked how to get in touch with me. So I want to give you my email address, and the books that are out right now are available on Amazon and Kindle and paperback. And also I'm very active on Facebook, and that's an easy place to find me. So my email address is Rivkah, R-I-V, like Victor, K-A-H. Don't forget that final H, because Rivkah is transliterated a bunch of different ways. And Rivkah at Kotevet, Kotevet.com.
How about you type it in the chat, or maybe I'll type it
I
in.
don't, yeah, can you do it? Because
Okay,
on the
let's start
iPad,
again.
it's a little more
Rivkah,
complicated.
Rivkah
Rivkah
at
at Kotevet, KOTEVET.com.
So
.com.
Kotevet
Right.
is the server, Rivkah at kotevet.com.
There you go.
Okay. Check if I got that correct.
Yeah, it came up. I
Okay.
saw I was right. Thank you for spelling my name right. Yeah.
I know it's important to you. Sometimes I miss the mark, but we try. Okay, so my perspective, that's very clear. And I just want to put my perspective on the table too. I feel that if I am teaching Torah in whatever way I am, to whatever kind of audience I am, at whatever level I am, it's important. If I'm interacting with people, it's important for me to in my venue to clarify what looks like a misinterpretation, because people are assuming that everything that happens here is real. I can, is valid, is validated according to Torah. So that's why I asked you that question. And I will probably bring these things up with Rabbi Tovia Singer, who's speaking on Sunday, is probably the world's biggest, or at least most public expert at this, because the thing is that there are laws. And even though eventually in the future, in the world to come, it does say that the mitzvahs b'telis la'asid lavo, that at some point in the future, when there is no room for good and bad, when we've eliminated the tree of knowledge of good and evil, when none of us knows exactly how that process is going to happen or the timeline, but then there will not be a need for any of the actual physical mitzvahs, because the point of the mitzvahs is to express divine will within the physical world. At that point, it will have been fully done. So everybody will just be connected to God. But for now, I'm just saying as me, and I'm not speaking for Rivkah or anybody, but I am speaking for my understanding of the Torah, the Lambert Rebbe, and so forth. And I'm pretty sure that every teacher here would theoretically agree with me, because this is halacha, this is Torah law, that there are laws that, for example, men and women have laws, a Kohen, a Levi, and Israel. They're categories of the Jewish, amongst the Jewish people, that there are different things that, a Kohen can't go into a cemetery. I can't bless the people under the talus with the special Kohen priestly blessing. We have, in the meanwhile, our do's and don'ts that are prescribed by halacha. I just want to say that. So there are a lot of opinions and a lot of passion around the opinions, but there is a bottom line when it comes to not learning and not searching and not feeling and not the world of free choice and not trying to make anyone do anything. But I feel that my job as an educator is to be forthright about what I know the Torah says, and then anybody's free to do with it whatever they want. Right. So and then the other thing that I want to say is that, because I think that this is really important, and Rivkah didn't really address it so much now, but Rivkah and I both learned from some of the same teachers about these things, and we're in some of the same conversations. So we both know that there's that the original Jew, non-Jew, originally everybody came from Adam, and then there was a split between the lineage of Abraham that went through Isaac and went through Jacob, and that became the Jewish people, and then the other people became non-Jewish people. And then for the most part, historically, the non-Jewish people collectively tried to wipe out the Jewish people. There was like that war, and now that's changing. It's changed a lot. It's one of the prophecies of redemption from the Maimonides, one of the laws actually, that in the first stage of the redemption, the only thing that will really change is that Jews will be free to study Torah everywhere. So now that that's happened, we are free to share Torah also. And there's also prophetically this thirst amongst many, many people in the world, even if it's not most, it's still, as you said, Rivkah, millions, and probably a lot more millions than we realize, because a lot of people probably are feeling things and don't know what to do with them. And nobody's talking to them. They don't know why they're feeling like disassociated from their previous, upbringing or whatever, or what they're searching for.
Or it could be that they live in a part of the world where the internet is not part of their daily lives, and they can't also connect to communities that we're trying to.
Right. So we really don't know how much is happening or how fast it's happening, but there is a pathway. There was outreach for quite a few years already to teach people the 7 mitzvahs, probably because the Rebbe encouraged it. And many of those people who learned the 7 mitzvahs and took them on are rightly frustrated because, okay, you're just telling me I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't eat a limb of a living animal, I can't kidnap someone, I can't worship idols. Okay, now what? I'm a little bit bigger than this. My thirst is a little bit, I want to roll. So the way that, it's the call is starting to be heard and answers are starting to come. I just want you to know, we talked about the Ger Toshav, there's a continuum that starts with opponent to the Torah, wants to wipe it out, and finishes with the, theoretically with the Torah observant, illuminated, let's say aligned Jew. And everybody is free to become that if they want to. Yes, it's hard at this stage, because it's a huge commitment. It's a huge commitment. Not only that, the entire Jewish people, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lezeh, we are in a situation where we're considered accountable for each other. So we don't want someone to come in who's going to add to our detriment. We want people to understand what they're coming into. It's not an easy path. It's a huge commitment. It's also, so conversion, being born to a Jewish mother, and somebody said, maybe on this chat, maybe the previous, that she just discovered that her mother's parents on both sides, or grandmother's parents on both sides were Jewish. You're Jewish, according to Torah law. And that's irreversible because it's a soul. Yes, it's true that there are people that the Jewish soul, which is a particular type of soul, or a particular level of soul, maybe, is incarnated sometimes into a non-Jewish body. And sometimes I don't know much about a non-Jewish soul being incarnated into Jewish body. According to law, that would still be a Jew who's obligated to do mitzvahs. I can't go there. I don't know that spiritual thing. But there is a spectrum in between opposing the Torah or just keeping these 7 laws that it used to be, that when the Torah, there was a Jewish government in Israel 2,000 years ago, it was by Torah decree, anybody who didn't keep these 7 laws, we were supposed to kill them. And the laws are the Noahide laws. That's a made up name. It's really the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. It's the 7 laws for the children of Noah. That means every human. So to be qualified as a human, these are the laws that God puts up. To be qualified as somebody who's assisting creation and not destroying it. That's what's called a human or a mensch. So that's a Ben Noach. But in between converting and becoming part of the Jewish people with all of that obligation, like Rivkah said, there's a lot more leeway if you're not, and just keeping the law, those 7 don'ts. There is a giant continuum where you are free to walk. And when you do, and in doing that, you're seeking a relationship with the Torah and with the land of Israel and with the people of Israel and with the God of Israel, who is the God of heaven and earth, the God of everybody. So in doing that, you start to walk the path of a ger. What is a ger? A ger is a stranger in a land that's not his. So all of you are expressing that. You feel like a stranger in the land that you grew up in. Who was the first ger? Abraham. His father was a seller of idols, and he went and smashed the idols. He believed in one God. He innovated the revelation of monotheism, of one God in the world. And he was a stranger in his land. He was a ger. He belonged in a culture, in a community, in a family, in a lineage that did not get him and that did not receive him kindly. He was thrown in the fiery furnace. So anyway, that the path of the ger is an extremely holy path. It is a prophetic path. It is a necessary path, and it is free and open to anybody who wants to walk it. But I'm just here to say, from my perspective, that if you walk that path, you need to do it you cannot say that you're keeping the Torah in accordance with God's will. If you're keeping the Torah in accordance to your wishes or your spiritual level, you could have a very, very high spiritual level, higher than most of the Jews that you might meet, but the law is still the law. So the law unfolds in new ways and new situations. The law will evolve. But right now, who is Jewish, that is prescribed by Torah law. Like it, don't like it. It makes no difference. Doesn't change anything. And I just have to say that.
Okay, that's totally fair. And I know we're finishing, but I want to add this one point that occurred to me as you were speaking. And that is, when the Rebbe was talking about the importance of all of the non-Jews in the world understanding their relationship to the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the Noahide laws, the world was in a certain place. And it occurs to me that I often think about this, like, were he alive now, what would he be, how would he be guiding this progression? Because as a Jew, certain things are opening up, deeper levels of Torah
Yes,
opening up. And we are promised, I learned this from Rabbi Anava actually some years ago, that there's a whole Torah of Mashiach that we don't even have yet. The whole internal,
of course, that's Torah Chadasha.
right, that's coming, that even for the Jews, okay? So we're
Yeah.
we all have spiritual ambitions, and there's more to be for all of us. And so it occurs to me that maybe at a certain point in time, 50 years ago or whatever, that was the job of that generation, to get the world, to get all of humanity on board with this foundational Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, in order to prepare them and for what's coming. And I'm imagining, that he knew what's coming, and he's saying, wait, this is the stage we're at now. But he's not here to, to tell us exactly. But that's what I think makes sense to me. Not that was meant to be the final destination for the rest of humanity.
And the Rebbe did speak about it.
Right.
The Rebbe did speak about it. And first of all, I know firsthand that the Rebbe told the head shliach, his head emissary in Italy, to when he printed that he should print the Tanya. The Rebbe wanted the Tanya, the premier classical text of Chabad Hasidus. He wanted it printed in every language and in every place. And he told the head shliach of Italy, I heard this from his son actually, that it should be printed, and I think he said Hachetariano, in a very academic language, so that very intelligent leaders would read it and would take it to heart. Learning Hasidus is for everybody. That is where the spirituality comes out. And the Rebbe promoted that there is no limit. Everybody should be learning Hasidus, the same Hasidus. And a lot of I have at least one student on the line here who was one of my, I have to say, best students in terms of her ability to understand the depth of her questions. She brings out more from me, that we unfold the Torah together. And we all learn from each other. We all sometimes have a teaching role, sometimes a student role. And as David Amelech, King David said, Mikol Malamda Isgalti, from all my students, the searching brings out so much more in us, as Rivkah said. So that's something you need to know. Also, the Rebbe I did talk about how the Ger Toshav, this status of being part of, you're not part of the Jewish people as a Ger Toshav, only as a Ger Tzedek, only if you're born Jewish, or if you're a convert, you have to actually convert according to law to be part of the Jewish people, the Jewish nation. But to be part of the Jewish mission, you do not have to. You only have to be promoting, loving and supporting the people of Israel, the Torah of Israel, the mission of Israel. You're part of that mission. And that's the Ger Toshav. And the Rebbe says that it was dangerous, even to the risk of life, to teach these things previously, but it's because it's not the risk of life anymore. We need to bring every person in the world as on that path of Ger Toshav, and it exists not in a legal sense, but it exists in a spiritual sense as a partner in the mission, a full partner in our days. And the Rebbe did say that. So I just want people to know it's not dry and not, this is alive. And
right. It'll change your life. It will change your understanding of yourself as a soul and a body. It will change your understanding of how history is holding. It will, and that is the kind of the flavor of Torah that I'm excited to be able to whatever limited ability I have to share and to expose the rest of the world to, because it's been like this Jewish secret for millennia. And the time is now here. There's something unpleasant going on in the comments.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to address it or not, but I will say that everybody's welcome here. But if you start to put yourself above Torah luminaries of the generation, like the Rebbe, then you are not welcome here, because that will just get in the way. And I just have to say it straight up. I've never had to say that before to anybody, but I'm just saying it. And take it personally, don't take it personally. I'm not naming names, but if, you're naming your own names. Anyway, okay, so that's where I have to draw a line. Like, we're not here to debate. We're not here to quit. There is a Torah lineage. It has remained intact and kept the Jewish people and the Torah alive as a living document throughout every attempt, very tense attempts to wipe out the Torah and every Jew in every generation. And we cannot allow I cannot allow myself to be part of that. There is a line of truth, and everybody's free to believe what you want, but you can't come to my house and start telling me that everything I believe and all the people in it that I invited to learn that it's not true. Then I can't, I can't. I'm sorry, but as I said, I've never had to say something like this before, but I need to. Okay, sorry, Rivkah, but I guess you're dealing with the messiness.
There you go.
It's a hot topic. It's a hot topic. It's a hot topic. Okay.
We're all learning how to live peacefully in the same tent together. And
Yeah.
it's a new job, humanity. So some of us are we're all learning.
It's risky to be on the edge, but you know what? You also
It
have
is. It is. You know, I know you know this, but I just want to say that it was really you who introduced me to Rabbi Yitzhak Ginsburg when and I spoke to him more than that one time that you introduced me to him, and I asked him, you know, I was getting so much flack, and I really, you know, like my non-Jewish friends and students, I want God to be proud of me, and I want to know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And he said to me, not only you do it, you must do it. This is your shlichut. He's speaking to me. And I lean on that quite a lot, because certainly he knows much more than I do, but also that he gave me the strength to deal with some of the messiness. Because there's
you remember that he told us that he thinks, I mean, he's a lone voice in that, but he thinks that we need to make conversion really easy and encourage every non-Jew to convert. He said that. We both heard him say that.
I do remember that. I do, and I'm not taking a stand on that in particular, because one of the things that, you know, I get slapped around on the Jewish side for what I do, but I also get slapped around on the non-Jewish side I was accused of being the head of a worldwide conversion ring, trying to seduce Christians to become Jews. So it is laughable, but it is also true. So it is what it is. And so I don't take a position on that. If somebody wants to convert, the very, very few people who are willing to go that long haul, you know, I'll help introduce you to the people that you need to know, so you can figure out if that's your path. But mostly I'm just trying to animate God's light as much as I can. Animate may not be the right word, but to reflect.
Sure.
To reveal its light in the world as much as I am able to in my slice of it. And when you take this whole summit as a whole, everybody has a different piece of the pie, you know, or a different cell in the body or whatever. We're all, and as I said an hour and a half ago, whenever we started talking, like, you know, you're a midwife, and there's something being birthed here, and this happens to be my piece. Now, as you know, we could have had a whole different conversation, just like as a Jew in my own Geula consciousness and where that takes me, and how it influences the decisions that I make in my everyday life, and all that. But that's a whole different conversation. This piece of it is something that God clearly handed to me and said, Rivkah, you need to work in this vineyard. You need to be tending this vineyard. So that's what
we gave people your email. Is that the best way for them to? It seems like a lot. First of all, it seems like I want you guys to know Rivkah first said no when I invited her. She's like, what do I have to contribute, or something like that. So that's funny, right? It's so
I don't want to. I just felt like we did this already, you know, like I didn't know what, but you're bringing more people into your orbit, and I'm working on new things, and so
Somebody already learned Parshas Bereshis. Why do you have to?
That's fun.
Okay. Anyway, we can see that there's really a need for this. So I'm very blessed, excited, interested, whatever, that the conversation here, it is very real. And there are people with really, really wanting to walk a new path. And that again is prophetic. And so is there another way that you can suggest people to be supported or helped in this and connected with each other and with their portion in the Torah?
Here's the thing is that I think right now, I'm most active on Facebook. I'm very active on Facebook. And what I noticed is I got kicked out of a bunch of groups on Facebook because I don't believe in Jesus, of people that I think, are in alignment. So this issue, there's two issues, I think, theological issues that people have to wrestle with to get on this path. One is the Jesus/issue, that's for sure. Who was he? What role did he play? Blah. And the other is whether or not you have reverence for the Torah, because I think we all agree on the written Torah, and the oral Torah is a bit divisive. The issue is whenever you open a group on social media, you get people who are not in the same place theologically, and then they start arguing with one another. So I don't have a solution right now. I wish I did. I wish, there are certain people that gravitate to me personally, and they are, and I try to be very, very responsive to people that I think that I can be helpful to. I don't have a macro solution yet, but I know that there needs to be one.
So just go out and find you at Facebook, email you, and if they come to Israel, talk to you about maybe coming for a Shabbat
coming
meal.
for Shabbat. Yeah, I'm a good cook.
I've never been.
I'm so. You should come. I'm sorry that I don't have something more defined. I just that's just where we are. This is where we are. I wish I did.
Okay, so isn't that cool? Isn't it cool, you guys? You're part of a startup. But you're in on the ground floor. It's the cosmic startup of the next phase for humanity. Something is being birthed here, Colleen.
Something is being birthed here. And you know what? And I have to say that as this work for me progresses, what I often say is, I really don't know what I'm doing. I just wait for Hashem to open a door, and then I walk through it. And that's how the books are playing out, and that's how my relationship with the people are playing out. And that's how these conversations are playing out. So I know, it's like I know where I am. I know the vision of the end point. I'm just a little fuzzy on the stages in between there. Right. And that's really something that I'm happy to let Hashem guide.
And everybody's here to help. All right. Thank you so much. As usual, I can't seem to make these conversations short. But people hang on with us. So I guess it's helpful.
It's amazing. Hashem should bless you in everything that you are doing to bring the Ula consciousness deeper and deeper into the world and to more people. And you're just amazing.
Amen. Thank you so much. Back at you. All right, you guys, we're done until Sunday. Take a look at the schedule page. I know that we have Tovia Singer, Nechama. Let me actually look at it right now. Oh, Orit Esther Ryder. She's a very fantastic healer, teacher, Rabbi Tovia Singer. And I didn't book anybody after Tovia because I thought maybe we might need some extra time. I don't know. We'll see what happens. And then on Monday, Nechama Sar Bergman, who's a brilliant author, very innovative, and Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson as our finale speaker for this summit. Anyway.
So let me wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Wherever you are in the world, Shabbat Shalom.
All right. To be continued.